Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 24 of EXP CultureCast. This is the bi-weekly podcast about what makes us us, and it's EXP's official diversity, equity, and inclusion podcast. I'm your host, Cody Gilkyson, Senior Manager and DEI Leader for EXP. And here with me today, I have the relatively newly minted, Healthy Mind Collective co-chair, Nicole Theodore. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you for having me.
You want to give everybody a little bit about your background and what you do at EXP?
Yeah, definitely. So I have been with EXP a little over 5 years now. And I currently work in the broker jobs division as a senior regional operations analyst. It's quite the hearty name. But yeah, so I work alongside Jamie Powell and everybody, helping everybody in the background.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, what drew you to Healthy Mind Collective?
I mean, really just the constant strive for a healthy mind. It started young. I've been surrounded by individuals who have always dealt with their mental health, either in good ways or in bad ways, or a mix of both. So it's kind of always been on my radar. And just as I age and just being a human being, seeing the need for myself and the need for others, it just drew me.
Yeah, I hear that. We love the Healthy Mind Collective and all that they stand for. For those that don't know, EXP Healthy Mind Collective is an official One EXP resource group. It's our
Mhm.
mental health focused group. It's a great place to go and just have a safe space to talk about your mental health and also, learn a little bit from some experts about mental health and how that relates to our careers in the real estate industry. It's a great space. We put the banner up along the bottom. You can check out Healthy Mind Collective. Just look for us on Workplace. It's pretty easy. So today we are still in the midst of Women's History Month, and I hear that you have read a book that really impacted you, and you want to talk about it a little bit. So the book is called "Invisible Women: Data Bias in a World Designed for Men." Can you kind of tell us what the book's about? What the central themes are?
Yeah, sure. So this is actually my second go at reading this book. I read it a few years ago, and it was, to me, one of those books that I think every person should read at least once because it was just so eye-opening for me. And being a woman, it was kind of saddened me how much I didn't know. But this book really is just showing that how data is so fundamental to our modern world. I mean, from economic development to healthcare, education, public policy. But yet it's showing how in this world that's largely built for and by men, we as a country and world are systemically ignoring half the population. It
Mm-hmm.
exposes the gender data gap, and then it shows the pervasive, bias and the profound effects that it has on women's lives even till today.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. We don't, we sort of take for granted the fact that our world is built for and by men, essentially,
Mhm.
Then even with, we know that there are women running the show virtually everywhere in the world behind the scenes. That this still is prevalent because it's sort of the way it was always done, which is
Yes,
a
yep.
thought process we really want to challenge here, right?
I think that's my least favorite statement is, well, this is always how we've done it.
Hate it. I hate it. Yeah, I hate that in any walk of life. I hate that in it when you come on a team and you ask like, oh well, why do we do it this way? Because we've always done it that way. It's not a good answer.
Nope. Nope.
Okay, so let's talk about data bias. Like, what does that mean? What's the impact that this would have on a woman's experience?
Well, because so much data fails to take into account gender. I mean, even when they do studies where they actually account for those females, a lot of those studies don't separate it by gender. It's all bulked into one. So even when in
Mm,
those cases, it treats men as the default and women as atypical. So bias and discrimination are sort of baked into our systems at this point. And because of that, women pay a tremendous cost for this through their time, their money, and sometimes with their health and lives.
mm. And that is essentially because, like, give an example of the type of data you're talking about, like data for a survey of a population or.
Let's say so when we're discussing like women's health and lives, data when it
Mm,
comes from studies where they do studies on certain drugs. Usually those drugs are studied on animals that are male. Or if they do include females in those studies, they aren't separated out. So we don't know the general effects for female versus male. So when it
oh,
comes to certain drugs, due to women's bodies, which has scientifically been proven can absorb things, metabolize things differently, even our bone density. There are studies that have even found that there are sex differences in every tissue of every organ of our body. So if we're
Wow.
specifically doing studies on only men when it comes to drugs, we're not seeing those differences in how it affects the female body. So with that, it can affect them exponentially, especially in certain cases where it comes to heart attacks or other things like that, where it's very male dominated health issues. A lot
Mhm.
of those are what is affecting women and their health.
Yeah, that's kind of profound actually. Um, Now, one aspect that you noted that the book talks about is this thought of invisible work, right? It's about the invisible work carried out by women. How does data bias contribute to the oversight of women's contributions in society, in the home, and in the workplace?
I so in that sense, it's really data. It's the lack of data, which can see
Mm,
that helps with this data bias. We really have not bothered to do as much research as we can. What we have done, though, has found some interesting stuff. So globally, and mind you, all these things that I'm stating, they are in the book. I do have, we have our resources and stuff. So I'm happy to share all of those with everybody who's watching this. But globally, 75% of unpaid work is done by women. On average, women spend about 3 to 6 hours per day compared to men's 30 minutes to 2 hours on unpaid work. So, this is things like childcare, elderly care, housework, things like that. So,
mm,
and then the biggest difference also is that men are more likely to be compensated for their work, whereas women are not. With this, the our favorite thing, the GDP, which kind of assists with all of these local policies and these governments, does not include house paid, or I'm sorry, unpaid work, which can also really level out or make issues when it comes to doing social policies like healthcare and childcare and stuff like that. So the lack of getting this data is really impacting women and the work that they do every day.
that's a really important point. We think about, you think about when they're doing studies like that of what the impact of that work week is on society, and they're leaving out that piece of the homemaker kind of deal.
And
Yeah,
it
it's
even
very
leads into the office too, where a lot of women are dragged into that. So, like those little things, like going to grab coffee for the office, these little
mm,
things where even this unpaid work that isn't seen just because it's so ingrained in us is still being passed off on the women, even in the workplace.
right, which is like it's like casual sexism, right?
Yeah,
Or
and sadly, you don't realize it. It's just it's so ingrained in our the way of thinking and the way that we're raised that you don't see it as sexism, you just see it as the normal thing. Women are the
right.
caretakers, they're the ones who handle that stuff. So
Mm,
it's sort of just everybody sort of, even women in their own mind. I've have it where I still have those issues where it's just what has happened from the moment you're born until the day that you die.
right, yeah. I mean, I think I can relate to this in a bit because I think I have always worked in really female professions. I always have. I worked at retail in a mall. I worked at at a Bath and Body Works for a few years,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I worked in back office banking, which is hugely female, data analysis, those kind of roles. It really was at my company, at least. Sort of, except for the majority of managers were male, right?
Yep.
And then there would be things asked of my peers and colleagues that they wouldn't ask me to do, right? Like, because they're female and it was kind of expected. Like you mentioned, the going to get coffee and that sort of business, they wouldn't have trusted me with something like that. They would trust the woman with it and then not give her any credit for it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then sadly, those things also affect their work because women are seen that way. So they don't promotions and things of that nature when it comes to that, especially with men, a lot of men in managerial positions seeing women as sort of being a liability because, oh, they might
Mhm.
go and have a baby and be gone for a long time, or they have to go pick up the kids. So there is that thing where it also does affect women who are trying to be in that workplace and trying to go shoulder to shoulder with men to show their worth. Sadly,
Mm.
those ingrained biases are making it even harder.
Yeah, well, yeah, when you said that about having a baby, my eyes rolled so hard I saw a part of my brain. So yeah, we see that a lot of sort of pregnancy bias, right? Where, if a woman is of childbearing age, they're discriminated against in the workplace, which is just gross, right? But I think the words childbearing are gross, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there's a sort of
It's
animalistic
very
style
like
to that. Yeah.
chattel, kind
Yeah.
of, I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting. So then it also talks about healthcare disparities, right? So can you share some insights into how these sort of things affect women's mental health and physical well-being?
Yeah, so definitely, as I shared with you, we definitely have those issues with the studies, not including women or at least not segregating the information out so that we understand the studies done on women. But then we also have that sort of that stigma with women when it comes to just women tend to be emotional. Women tend to be hysterical. So when women do tend to go to a doctor for certain issues, a lot of the time they tend to be rebuffed. I think I read that women are 70% more likely to be put on antidepressants compared to men. And a lot of those issues have to do with them going to a doctor stemming from pain and things like that, and them not finding the cause and thinking it's just in the woman's head.
Yeah.
So this can greatly affect them. And then the great thing about this is these antidepressants that were being forced to be taken, all those studies were done on animals that were men. And so we don't even know how these antidepressants are really affecting us or if they're even really doing any help for us.
Yeah, right.
Um,
I mean, and it's been proven as well that if you take an antidepressant when it's not necessary for your body chemistry, it can make you more depressed. So,
exactly.
yeah.
And then going to your doctor and not feeling heard, not feeling listened to, that's going to affect you in many ways. If you don't have a doctor who's taking you seriously, you're not getting the help you need. And it's going to keep a lot of women from even trying to get help because there is nothing that it seems to help them.
Yeah. That's yeah. Yeah, I can really relate to that. And it's some advice that we give often on a lot of different topics is if you're receiving care that isn't meeting you at your level or capable of understanding where you're coming from, it's not appropriate care, right? And even, we live in an American capitalist society where we have the ability to say this isn't good enough and find something else, right?
Yep.
Not everybody is lucky enough to live in an area where there are other options that work with their insurance. But um, we also work at a company that has pretty good insurance. So
Yeah. A lot of places when I call them like, "Oh, wow, you have some good insurance." I'm like, "Yeah, thankfully."
yeah. And I would sidebar this with a little piece of advice that I always give about finding appropriate care is appropriate care doesn't always look like you. Compassion can come in any form factor. I've been to a lot of therapists over the years, and the one that I felt really saw me and heard me and could relate to me was a 90-year-old Jewish woman. Wouldn't have picked that one out of the hat as
Right?
be the one that fit,
And I think that's the
I've
key
been
to
to a
say.
therapist who literally looked like a mirror image of myself, and he didn't get me, right?
See?
So
And I think that's key too, is that this is an interview process. If you're with a doctor, this isn't it. You're not married to this person. If you're not
Mm-mm.
feeling comfortable, if you're not feeling good, go to somebody else. Find that person. I used to have that mental thing stuck where I'm like, oh, well, I'm with them. No, you're not doing it for me. This is for me and what I need. So go find somebody who does help you. Don't feel stuck.
Yeah, and the studies show that about 50% of the time, if you're not comfortable enough to really open up about your problems to your doctor or your mental health provider, they're not the right doctor for you,
Yep. Yep.
right? That's if you have to be comfortable enough to tell them the stuff that's uncomfortable to talk about, and if you're not, move on.
Yep.
Sounds simple, but that can be difficult. Yeah, that's interesting. So that's healthcare. Let's talk about economic inequality. Between the genders, there is economic inequality. How does data factor in there?
Well, I think I mean, really honestly, data factors into so many things. And so when we have a lack of it, we're not seeing certain things that are affecting individuals. So, like I said, with the unpaid work, that does greatly affect a woman's ability to work in the workforce and be paid for such work.
Mm,
There was a discussion about the work hours being set from 9 to 5, which is a key time for other services that need to be held. So women who are caretakers as well as working full time have to do that decision making. Do I go and take the day off of work to take care of my mom who needs to get to the doctors? Or do I just go to the work and make that money that I need to make in order to do it? with us not taking into account and not understanding how much unpaid work these women are doing, we're then doing a disservice in the workforce because they're not able to do the best work at their ability. They're getting paid less because they are seen as doing less because of these things. And as we discussed too, with the pregnancies and just the female issues, we are seen as more of a liability than a service in the work field. So sometimes we're not getting one the things we need to make our work life workable, and two, to make our lives workable. So that personal life and that work balance is very, very hard to get.
Yeah. Yeah. That again, it speaks to me. It's something I can relate to. I'm a married gay man, and gender roles are a little weird in a gay relationship, but I do tend to be the homemaker, as well as the breadwinner.
Yeah.
So my time is precious, and my time is I'm not always available. I'm lucky that I work in a job where I essentially make my own schedule. There are some demands I have to meet, but sometimes there aren't enough hours in the day for a salary job and being a homemaker. And that's not really taken into account when you take on a role, right? I think for a man, it's assumed that if you take on a salaried role, you're always available
Yes.
because there has to be someone else taking care of the home, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And for a woman, it may be assumed when you take on a salary position, well, she's not going to be as available as a man because she has to take care of the home, right? Both of those things are a bias.
And the funny thing is, with those views, they can so easily be fixed by saying, okay, how can we as men step up and assist these women with, so
That's
with these views that they use to push us out, they could use to
right.
bring us in. And I always
Well,
say this,
even just
we make
break
up,
down that gender stereotype there. Just because
yeah.
you're the woman doesn't mean you're the one doing all the housework.
I
That's
mean,
the
we
so
make up
1940s.
49.8% of the world. So we're touching that 50% mark.
Mm,
And the fact that we're so stunted, like if only 50% of your body was working at its maximum level, you wouldn't be able to do much. So
no,
with these biases and with this lack of data, it could easily be corrected. And all these little idiosyncrasies that men see as failings for women could actually be filled if we saw these different things. And actually, like, they aren't failings in women, they're failings in society and what
mm.
society has failed to account for women.
You're speaking my language. You got my head jiggling. I love this. Yeah, these are things we have to address as a society.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly is something you can look at the dynamic in your own home and make a change. And that at a small level then fans out to society. But it really is something that you have to, when we talk about how do you make a societal change, right? These are the kinds of conversations you have to have among your
Exactly.
peers, and
Yeah.
particularly the peers who don't feel this way, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. So, we have a question about data collection practices. So, the book addresses shortcomings in data collection methods. How could those methods be improved to better capture the diverse experiences and realities of women?
Oh, how could it improve? Better data collection, it would be definitely a game changer. I think that how it can improve is obviously having more women to give their points of view on what data
Mm,
is needed. We have a lot of men in power. We have a lot of men making policies. Yes, yay, we do have some women in there, but it's not nearly where it needs to be. So the more diversity that you have that starts at the top, it can tend to trickle down to those individuals who need it. So, I mean, we just need more people who have different points of view, different points of
that's so true.
lives,
Yeah.
to come in and give us those gaps that we're missing.
And even have a societal shift so it doesn't have to be a woman that speaks up for women, right?
Exactly.
So that if we
Yep.
can get folks that are understanding and caring and compassionate
Mhm.
and effective allies, those are the two words I love the most,
Exactly.
effective allies for different communities. And that happens by paying attention to work like we do with the DEI team here at EXP Realty and work that we do at One EXP. Pay attention and learn a little more about a walk of life that's different than your own. then you
And
can.
shifting the perspective too, instead of saying, hey, why is she not capable of doing this? Or why is she not doing this? Maybe it's not her, or maybe it's not them. Maybe it is something that is in the system or in the process that is affecting them and needs to be shifted. Maybe
That's
the
it.
reason
Yeah,
women aren't into STEM isn't because girls lack the desire to learn about science, technology, and electronics, but maybe it's because they don't feel an inviting environment in that study. So there's so
yeah,
many things that we can do to shift it and saying, instead of it's wrong, something's wrong with the individual, maybe it's wrong with the process or society and how it was
that's it.
built.
And it goes back to the first point we made on this call about this is the way we've always done it,
Yeah.
right? We're
Yeah.
asking folks to take a zoom out view of the work that you do and see how does this address gender disparity,
Yep.
right? It sounds silly to make it that simple, but it really is that simple. Zoom out and see how you could address it. And if you think we could address it, but it seems a little hard, that's a key indication that you should do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I
Right.
think that's a lot of the issues that have occurred with this data bias is, well, how do we measure that? That just seems difficult. I don't know how we would do that. And so instead of putting the mind power behind it and figuring it out, they just kind of brush it aside and, you know,
Yeah.
just leave it as is.
And honestly, not to call anybody out or anything, but figuring out how to quantify the unquantifiable or the difficult to quantify is the job of a data analyst.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that. So another piece of this is intersectionality, and I think this is a great tie-in because anybody that knows the story of the origins of intersectionality. So before I get talking about intersectionality, because I'm going to ramble about this a bit because it's a hot button for me. But intersectionality is essentially the concept that all of us are contain multitudes. Essentially, all of us represent a lot of different factors that make us us. That's This podcast is called the Biweekly Podcast about what makes us us. That collection of things that makes us us is called intersectionality. Um, Comes from a woman named Kimberly Crenshaw, who in the 80s was looking at data that said the wage gap between men and women is X. And she then looked at the wage gap between Caucasian people and Hispanic people is X.
Mhm.
But her as a as a Hispanic woman was much worse than both of those numbers, right? That's where the term of intersectionality comes from, because the
Yep.
number for just a Hispanic person did not apply to her, and the number for just a woman did not apply to her.
Yeah.
And she found, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was a staggering amount. It was like women make 88 cents on the dollar, Hispanic people make 80 cents on the dollar, but a Hispanic woman, if you really drilled down that data, was making like 54 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So it's so important that when we're looking at research studies or data analysis of any kind, we talk about the medical stuff earlier with drugs, that they are testing on not just, oh, we need to make sure we have a man and a woman that we're testing, but check a man with a history of male pattern baldness and a woman who has had a child, or
Mhm.
a woman of African descent,
Yep.
or a man of who grew up experiencing violence in their life. Like, there are so many different things that impact our biology, um, that all have to be accounted for. Because who
Exactly.
knows, if
Yeah.
they don't do any of those studies and then a pregnant woman takes the drug and loses her baby because they didn't test
Exactly.
properly,
Yep.
because they only tested on men, or they only tested on women with no
Yeah.
history of
With no,
pregnancy taken
yes.
into account, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's a big deal, right? What are your
Did you
thoughts on
ever have you ever seen did you ever watch Scrubs, the show
Yeah, love
Scrubs?
that show.
One of my favorite all-time shows. So
Yeah.
good. There is a scene in there that is like one of my favorite scenes, and it's Elliot and I can't remember who else, but they're arguing back and forth about who had it more difficult, a black doctor or a female doctor. And then as they're arguing back and forth, their female doctor walks by and they're like, "Oh yeah." And then so it kind of made them stop and think like, "Oh wow, there's more to it than just that," you know? So and it's true. You don't
Right.
realize that until you start combining things and you see the layers that just continue on due to just these differences in individuals. And it's always going to be that way. Everybody is exclusive. Not one individual is the same. So it's just having as many people accounted for in anything and everything we do will always make sure that people are included when we do make policies, when we do pass healthcare, when we do present new drugs, because it's key. It'll help everybody.
Hmm. I mean, and you're never going to be able to hit every combination of unique personalities that make us all the beautiful snowflakes that we are, right? I'm not using the derogatory form of snowflake where we talk about somebody that's fragile. I'm
The
talking about the fact that
individuality part, yes.
humans are completely unique from each other. When we do the intersectionality exercise, when I teach my intersectionality course, what we essentially do is we ask people a series of like 30 questions, really rapid fire. Like, do you know your parents? Are they still alive? Are they still together? Ever had any medical family history that you're worried about? Where did you grow up? What country are you from? Do you speak the language you come from? All of these questions. And then we say, okay, the person next to you is also white. How connected do you feel to them now that you've answered all these questions?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, we are really different. That's and finding common ground is really important, but it's also important to note that you don't know what's going on in somebody's life.
And that's key too. Yeah, I
And
agree.
that's really key. Yeah. I love intersectionality. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
I can tell. I can
It's one
tell.
of those things that like came up as a buzzword a few years back, and I was like, okay, here's the new DEI buzzword. But I went to a seminar from Deloitte about intersectionality that did that same exercise that I teach, and I was like, oh my god, I get it. Like
Mhm.
we are so different because we think about it from terms of looking at like equality, right? There's a reason why DEI is for equity and not equality because
Different.
how are we ever going to be equal when we're so different, right?
Exactly. Yep. I
I mean,
agree.
inequality is okay, but giving people the same access doesn't necessarily give them the same playing field,
Exactly.
right? That's
Yep.
what the equity piece is about. We're getting really off topic here, but I'm kind of fiery
I
today.
like it. I like it. It's all important stuff.
Yeah. That's what happens when you have a friend on the podcast. You know what I mean? We're just talking
Just a
now.
conversation at this
Yeah.
point now.
Feedback says this is the kind of episode people like, though, so it's fine. So, we have a couple more questions we want to ask about the book. So, corporate responsibility in the workplace. How can companies take responsibility for addressing data bias, promoting equity and equality, and supporting the mental health, particularly of their female employees? What can companies do to be better about this stuff?
Easy answer would be more women in power, obviously, but our company actually does a pretty good job of that. I'm actually pretty
Yeah.
impressed to see that. The other thing though that I don't think people really think about is getting men as allies and advocating, educating them so that they can start making those decisions on the behalf of women. If they knew more, if they understood more, like I said, I have a list of books in my life where I'm like, every human being should read this at least once in their life. And I'm
Hmm.
going to probably make my kids read these certain books as well as they get older. This book is one of them. I
That's
mean, it
great.
was a changer even for myself. You've got to understand, I was born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada. Like when it comes to diversity, and like it's all over the gamut, So and then the data bias of females was sort of already ingrained in me, so I didn't really see it. I lived it, I just didn't understand it. Reading this book helped me understand that maybe racism ain't dead and maybe women still need to fight for some stuff here because it's not so obvious. Like we
Yeah.
said, the data doesn't exist, so we don't have these papers that we can wave in their face, say, look, 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 this is what's happening. It's
Hmm.
stuff that's ingrained in us. It's stuff that's there, but we just don't see.
Hmm.
So really educating our male counterparts and letting them help be an ally and speak for us as well, it would be a good thing too. We
Yeah.
need that. We can't just say only women in power and nothing else. No, we all have to work together.
Hmm. Yeah. If you have a strong male ally that's fighting to help women get to the top, that
Mhm.
is so important. It's, this is, people are going to think I'm a broken record, but I use this quote all the time. It's the quote that turned me from wanting to be a volunteer to wanting to do a work in the DEI space. So I heard my hero, Amber Hike, speak at Out and Equal in 2018. And she said, I'm going to paraphrase because it's a kind of a long quote, but the onus isn't on women to fight sexism and misogyny, and it's not on queer people to fight homophobia. It's not on trans people to fight transphobia. It's not on disabled people to fight ableism. It's not on elderly people to fight ageism. The responsibility is yours and mine to weaponize our privilege, recognize and weaponize our privilege, so that we can fight in the rooms that they're not allowed to be in.
Exactly. Those women's rights are humans' rights.
That's it. Yes.
That's it. They just work.
Right.
So there should be no differentiation. Same with individuals, like we just discussed. These people are human beings, regardless of their stance or what they see or do or live.
Yeah.
These are human rights.
Yes. And there's nothing more insidious than the thought that we live in a society where sexism is dead because there are lots of women in power, or we live in a society where we're past racism. That is the most insidious, hateful thing you could possibly think. Yeah. Those things are alive and well, and there are people that are victims of it every day. Every day. And this is me, I'm going to take 1 second up on a soapbox I don't normally get on, but women's rights are under attack in the world right now. And it must be taken seriously. I'm not going to go into more detail because I don't want to get in trouble here, but I will say you need to put yourself in the shoes of a woman faced with some of the questions that women have to face, and really understand what she's going through. And if you can't put yourself in those shoes, talk to somebody who's been through it so that you can understand better. It's your job as a man to understand before you vote on a woman's rights what that woman is going through.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm off my soapbox now. Thank you. But it's massively important, and I speak to this because this episode is coming out right at the tail end of Women's History Month, and right at the tail end of a month of monumental work done by EXP to address the plight of the women in our world. And coming soon, we're going to have the MARC training, which is about men advocating for real change, and everybody at the director level or higher is going to take this training, including our men. And I'm going to be there, so I'll be able to report back to you and say, yes, it was effective, right? Or, I don't think it was. I'm the honest guy. I'll tell you. Yeah. And then I'll help them figure out what more we need to do to make sure our men understand how to advocate for real change for women. Also got this great partnership with Catalyst. We have had Betsy Myers here twice this month already. We are having Sheeran coming in with a big panel of women that inspire me. I mean, like literally inspire my socks off. That's going to be our last panel of the month. And, we are right on the eve, right on the cusp of launching the biggest launch for 1EXP in its history since its inception. The launch of the EXP Women's Impact Network is coming at the end of this month. That's a sneak peek I'm giving you. It's coming, baby, and it's going to be big and impactful. And the only way it's going to be big and impactful is if you join. That's not me talking to the women. I'm not sitting here wearing pink with a woman on my show because I'm only talking to women. I'm talking about men to join the EXP Women's Impact Network, because this is about how women make an impact and how we can make sure that their impact is felt and heard. And the impact of women at EXP, honey, I was just having the conversation with Jessica the other day.
Oh,
they gave us.
Speaking of a woman with impact right there, Jessica Nieto.
Right, Jessica Nieto. Like I have a complicated relationship with Jessica Nieto because she is my original mentor here at EXP.
Okay.
She's one of my closest friends at EXP, and she's easily the person that inspires me the most every day. It's hard. It's hard to be good friends with someone who shines like the sun. You know what I mean?
You couldn't describe her better. You could not describe her better. Yep. I'd say,
I do consider her a really good friend. I'm also saying that she's my friend is very humbling for me. You know what I mean? But anyway, we were having the conversation, and part of the Women's History Month toolkit for EXP was, here's a way where you can highlight a woman who's made an impact on you. And I really sat down and started listing off the women at EXP who've made a big impact on my life and changed my way of thinking. And if I took a day every day this month to highlight one of those women, I'd be done maybe by next Women's History Month. You know what I mean? So we are a company of women that's powered by women. that in more ways than one, not just women are doing the work, women charge my batteries every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's such immense value in the women at EXP and women in the workforce and women in general. But I'm talking about the women that I know, because that's the way you really talk to somebody, is make it something they can relate to. I'm telling you, you cannot turn around without finding a woman who has done something amazing at this company.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm talking to one of them right now. Look at you. You're great.
I'm trying. Every day I try a little bit harder.
And, I personally take it as my mission to make sure that the women at this company know how I feel about them. Right.
And
I think it's
and
important
it's
that
very much
we
appreciated.
signal boost. You see somebody doing something cool, signal boost it. That means go make a post and say, you know what I saw Nicole do today? Blew my mind.
Yeah. And I mean,
Doesn't cost
hopefully
you
one
anything.
day we'll get to the point where, you know what, Women's History Month is just history. Because
It's just
again, women's history is still history. Like we did that and we
Yes.
contributed. It's not a separate thing.
That's it. So finally, as someone listening to this podcast and about this book, this wonderful book that you've read, that you've told us all about, what are some key takeaways from the book that you want people to take home if they're listening today that would convince them to go read it, right?
It's just that really the key takeaway is that it's not over. It's getting better. Trust me, we're definitely further from the 1950s than but there is still work to be done. And this, I think the great thing about this book is she hits you so hard with facts and then has those references for her facts that there's really no question in your mind that things need to change. So I'm an avid reader. I love reading. I don't really even need a purpose. If it's just bound with words, I will grab it and pick it up. But one of the main goals is I'm always reading a book that helps me see something, whether it's from something that's going on in the world or helps to change my perspective. Because like we've said, intersectionality, I've lived only my life. I only see the way that I can see it. And for maybe the people that have touched my lives, read books simply just so you can gain another perspective. And I mean, even fiction books that I have read that didn't even have any nonfiction have changed my view on things because they've touched on something that has touched me. So just read this book so that you can see not only what needs to be fixed, but how you can help fix that and how you can help to be a part of that.
That's
Knowledge
brilliant.
is power. That's it. And it's
Boom.
cheesy to say, but it 100% is. The more we know, the more we can make up for it.
That's it. God. And I mean, I'm going to boil down a little thing that you said to another degree. If you see a book on a shelf and you say, well, that doesn't speak to my experience,
Read it.
read it. That's the book you should be
That's
reading.
the book you should read. Exactly. And that's key. I love that because it's true. There are so many things I'm like, I don't think I'd understand. Well, guess what? I'm going to try to understand. I'm going to read that book so I can see. Because even if I don't understand, you don't always have to understand, but you at least gain a little perspective and maybe a little bit of it's not understanding, but compassion. Maybe a little bit of empathy will come from that. Maybe just because you don't get it, but at least you saw something that gave you a little bit of perspective.
That's
Anything.
it. That's in Black History Month, I had someone, I'm not going to name names, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but we had somebody that came to us and saw the Black History reading list that we'd come up with, and they said, as a white person, I would feel weird reading that kind of book because where am I going to use the knowledge where I could be an expert on Black history? And I said, you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Right. And it may not be that you're asked to weigh in on Black history and the experience of a Black individual, but what you are going to be able to do is relate to them better.
And also, like we said on voting, your voting affects everybody. So guess what? You're going to use that knowledge that you gain from that to say, okay, you can see it now from a perspective of another individual. And maybe those policies that you're voting for, you'll realize aren't going to be. So there's so much more than just using it to, there's just so much more. There's so much more.
There's so much more to it. I mean, because I equate it back to, there was maybe 10 years ago, there was a whole slate of politicians who changed their opinion on gay marriage when a member of their family came out as gay.
Yeah.
Okay. It should not have to happen directly to you for it to start mattering. And an easy way around that, if you can't relate to gay stuff because you don't have anybody gay that you know or in your family or in your close circle, read a book, and now you're going to feel close to that person who wrote that.
Yes.
Right? Now they're that person for you. So now you understand the experience. It doesn't have to happen in your life. There's a quote by Jonathan Lovitz that I love so much that says it doesn't have to happen to you for you to give a damn. Right?
And volunteering. That's another thing that can actually help you go into somebody's life and understand. You don't understand the gay lifestyle. Guess what? Go volunteer, and assist. Like, there are so many things that you can do to educate yourself that can give you, at the very least, a little compassion for other individuals in their lives.
That's it. And I throw this out there all the time, particularly for people who want to understand the gay experience a little bit better, is if you are a person who is of the age to be a parent, right? I ask you, one day, go to a pride festival with a shirt that says free mom hugs or free dad hugs and see what happens to you, right? That's a big, big movement that's happening at pride festivals and that sort of thing, where it's more than just go and look and experience and all that. You can only get so much from that way. But when somebody comes up to you with tears in their eyes and gives you a hug and said, "This is the hug I never got from my family," that is going to change your life.
100%. We actually have a community. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, and I think they're nationwide, where you can actually sign up. And so individuals who are gay or are trans, who have been abandoned by their family, if they have like a big event, like a wedding or something, you can actually sign up to step in for their parents. You can sign up and say, "I will walk you down the aisle. I will be there for you as your step-in mom to be there for that big event for you." It's beautiful, and people I've become part of that community. I'll send you the information, but people can go on there and say, "I will be your mom for the day if you need me. I will be your father for the day if you need me. I will be your support system in this big time because you don't have it."
That's great. That's amazing. Anyway, this has been really fun. I hope people got something out of this episode. If they didn't,
read the book,
ears, honey.
Just read the book.
We've been dropping nuggets this whole time. But anyway, this has been another episode of EXP CultureCast. You can always find us on YouTube. Just look for EXP CultureCast. We're also available on Spotify, Podbay, Apple Podcasts, and on KGCI Radio, Real Estate on Air. If you recognize my voice, I'm the voice of the commercials over on that lovely radio station. Nicole, it was great to have you, and we will see you next time.
This was a blast. I can't wait.